Sup nerds, I'm Tom. Today we're going to talk about the sort of campaign expansion for It's a Wonderful World called War or Peace. Now, given that this expansion does work in a campaign type format, like as you can see, there's envelopes and boxes and little foil pack things that you open. I'm going to give my opinion about it right now, as spoiler free as possible, right? I'll briefly explain kind of what you can expect and say my thoughts on it. And then after that, I will go a little bit more in depth and talk about what is in here in a more spoiler type fashion. So I'll give you a warning at when you can, cut it, I guess. So if you don't want to know what's in these envelopes, you can watch the first few minutes. If you do want to know, watch the whole thing. All right, let's do it that way. So this expansion is a campaign. It's not a legacy campaign. There's not, it's like resettable. I mean, you can put everything back into these envelopes if you want to and play it again, especially because it is war or peace. So there are, in a way, choices that can be made that will bring it, more towards war, more towards peace. In a way, it kind of changes from game to game a little bit. Like even there are 6 envelopes open, but you only play 5 games because you play the first 4. And then you open envelope either 5 or 6, depending on what you have done thus far. And then there is this box they will tell you to open this at some point. And then this pack actually gets opened after the end of the campaign. It even says on the back, don't open before the end of the campaign. So these are almost like your reward in a way for completing it, and then you can use these in other games moving forward. So 5 games is actually not that much, especially because these games go really quick. You could easily play this in 2 days or probably even in one evening if you really wanted to. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of campaign games or legacy games or yeah, those are the two, right? Maybe heavily story-based games, but anything where you need to link a lot of games together and you need to get the same people every single time. The explanation that I used recently was I was driving with Wes, and we had his kids were in the back, my nephews, and my nephew Jason is like 4, and we drove by, we were going to Chick-fil-A, but we drove by like a little carnival thing that was in the parking lot by Chick-fil-A, and there was all these lights and stuff, and he was like, whoa, that's so cool! And I was listening to him and I was like, wow, I cannot remember the last time I saw a carnival and got excited. Because I did, there was a time when I did, but now I see a carnival and I go, ugh, like my stomach starts hurting just thinking about it. Like those rides suck and all the food is garbage there, and it's loud and it's expensive. It's like, ugh, But there was a time when I saw it and I thought that was awesome. That's how I feel about campaign games. Like there was a time when I saw that and I was like, ooh, that's so cool. Things are going to change. My character's going to get better. We get to write things up and rip things up. Oh, that's so cool. But now I think I'm never going to get that done. Especially if it's 12 games or something like Pandemic Legacy type thing. I'm like, I can't get this. I'm going to try and get the same group of people together 12 times in a row. Just to play the same game over and over and over again. Somebody's not going to be available this week and we're going to wait, and now it's going to be 6 months pass by and we didn't finish it. Just like I have a Charterstone campaign and a Pandemic Legacy campaign that I'm never going to finish because people moved away and things like that. And it's also weird because if you don't finish, like, okay, you can buy a game and play it like twice and still feel like you got your value out of it. Oh, you really liked it. Like certain tons of you have games on your shelf that you've never played, but you definitely have games on your shelf that you've played once or twice, and you don't feel like you wasted your money. But if you buy a campaign game and you don't finish the campaign, don't you kind of feel like you didn't get your money's worth? You're like, I did not finish that game. It's like I bought a movie and I didn't finish the movie, even though it's not accurate. I mean, you got 4 or 5, you got more plays out of that than you did the other games. Okay, but enough about that. Just in general, I didn't love this expansion. I don't love campaign expansions at all. This one's only 5 games, so it's easy. We didn't like 2 days. And it's resettable, but also like some of the cards are usable in other games later on, so you don't even have to do the campaign. You can just pull out some cards. Ooh, let's use these cards in It's a Wonderful World now. Okay, cool. But I didn't feel like what it added game to game was all that much. And a lot of the cards that are in here are campaign specific. So I said, oh, you can use some cards, but only some. So the fact that this is actually relatively cheap, I tend to not talk about price in my review because prices change all the time and stuff. And I don't know what constitutes expensive or cheap for you. So I don't really want that to factor into my opinion of a game. But in here, it kind of does a little bit because from what I've seen, this is pretty cheap. So you do kind of get your bang for your buck, right? especially because you do get the 5 games, and even if you don't do the campaign and you just use the cards, okay, so you didn't spend that much money to get a small amount of cards, maybe that's worth it. But overall, I liked Corruption and Ascension expansion way better. I mean, I'm glad, I love this game, so I'm glad I have this. I think there's another campaign expansion. I think maybe that was Kickstarter exclusive or something. But I would get that as well. I mean, I would get everything for this game, but this is definitely, I would buy this one second and Corruption Ascension first. But now I'm going to get into spoilers. I'm going to open this up and I'm going to show you, I'm going to talk about what comes in this expansion. So if you don't want to know, click away right now. Subscribe to our channel, Game Toppers, link in the description, all that kind of stuff. But now I'm going to talk about what comes in this expansion. The campaign-specific stuff is the bulk of this. So like the very first game, and there's a solo, this is soloable. It says 1 to 5. I never do solo games, so I can't really talk about it, but these skull cards, I think, are solo, so we didn't use those. But okay, for the very first game, you have this card that shows a couple symbols on it. Like, okay, when you burn a card, instead of building it, you can burn it for the resource in the corner. Well, if I'm burning it for a green in the corner, hey, if I burn it for a green, right? And instead of taking that green and putting it on a card like normal, I could put it on this card that's in the middle. And that green turns into a black. Honestly, that's pretty underwhelming to me. I was like, oh, okay, that's not that big of a deal. Now, this thing has effects in later games, just like most of the other things do. Like whether this is completed or not depends on the type of card you're going to get for the end of the round. So you will get cards for the next game that are special ability cards. Like whoever wins gets Director of PAX 10. Whoever doesn't win gets PAX 10 member, but that's only if this is complete. Otherwise, you do the hacking thing. I think that's war and this is peace, right? Again, I opened up this pack. 2 cards were solo. 2 cards were the actual thing. Well, really, it's for number of players. You only use 1 card is the thing. That's like the new thing for that game. And then you get all these campaign cards. And that's how all of them are. For the second one, you get these architects, or statues, that's what they're called, right? So you have these statues that everybody starts with. And they're kind of expensive to build, but once you build them, now you can produce wilds, or you can produce tokens. Ooh, when do you produce tokens and wilds and stuff? Well, let me open up this box. Okay, come on. You put this little thing at the end here, and that's where you will produce any of those tokens or wilds as the very last thing you do. And I mean, that's pretty cool. Like, but then, depending on whether you get your statue built, you could get this abandoned construction card for later, which is negative points, or you get Charismatic Leader. Like these are like, those are just those special ability cards that everybody gets. I think this one was probably the coolest one. This one, those statues, number 3, the statues turn into cards that get mixed into the deck, and they're a little bit cheaper to build. And they all just produce a single wild instead of the other ones were variable. But everybody gets handed Partisan of War or Partisan of Peace. There's like, depending on the number of players, you divvy these out differently, right? So some players will be on a team, but you don't know who, right? And the players who are on a team, you add their score together and divide it by the number of players. So people will win as a team, but you don't know who's on your team. And they also get bonus points, so you can kind of say, well, I know one of the Partisan of War cards gets extra points for black cards, and they're taking a lot of black cards, so maybe that was like the most interesting one, I'd say, because the whole team aspect is, it's cool, but none of these things are necessary. Like, yeah, I would be willing to play with this again, include this in my games, or the statues. Or, I mean, with the very first thing I talked about, the PAX 10 thing, I don't know, that was so minor to me, it didn't even really make sense. Whatever. But at the end, you also open up this pack of cards, and these you can just mix into the main deck, and these cards will produce wilds and produce tokens and stuff in varying ways. Okay, those are cool. Like, it felt like almost like there's an expansion, they wanted to build an expansion that lets you, the new cards let you produce wilds and produce tokens, and then they said, well, let's pump it up a little bit. And again, if you like campaigns and stuff, that's cool. But as I was just showing you, some of these things are like, yeah, They are include-able in other games, but it's not an auto-include like Corruption and Ascension. It's kind of an auto-include for me. I was just a little underwhelmed, but whatever. I'm going to put a link for base game and both expansions in the description box down below. I already said all that. Game toppers, whatever. Subscribe and you'll never be bored.